you, Dennis, and thank you all for having me today. As you said, my name is Mark. I work for the Florida DEP under a subsection of the DEP called the Indian River Lagoon Aquatic Preserves. There we go. So first and foremost, for those of you who aren't aware of our particular branch of the DEP, DEP is a huge organization, and we're a very small subset of that called the Aquatic Preserves Office. Basically, you can kind of think of us as like a sister program to the state parks, where instead of managing the land like state parks do, we actually manage the water. So we're kind of just a sister to that organization. The way the aquatic preserves are designated, the state has recognized them as exceptional areas of submerged sovereign lands, basically just areas that have been noted as being in great condition or essential habitat, and an area that we want to preserve. So as Dennis mentioned, we manage 7 aquatic preserves, which you can see it's a little fuzzy up there, but it goes all the way from Mosquito Lagoon down to the Lake Worth Creek, Loxahatchee River area. So I think it's about 140 miles of the east coast of Florida, a very large section. And within that are 7 aquatic preserves in the Mosquito Lagoon, the Banana River, and then almost continuous from the Malabar area all the way south to Lake Worth Creek Lagoon. So our office operates on 2 main tenets. The first one is we want to protect and enhance the ecological integrity of the aquatic preserves. And for those of you who have been out in the lagoon before, you know it's a beautiful area. We have a lot of different interesting habitats and species that live there. It's designated as, I believe, the most diverse estuary in North America. So along the lagoon, we have things like nesting wood storks, which are an endangered species. We also have diverse seagrass habitats, which are just an essential habitat for many types of fish and mammals in the lagoon. And we have the second half of our main tenet, which is to encourage sustainable use and foster stewardship. So not only do we want to protect the lagoon, protect its habitat, but we want to encourage people to get out there and use it and be stewards of the environment to protect it themselves. So sometimes those can be conflicting ideas, but a lot of times there's a real synthesis there, a real syncope, and we can use the public to help protect these resources. So in order for us to get out, to do our outreach and encourage people to use the lagoon responsibly, we hold a number of events, Spoil Island projects and restoration events. We'll do things on islands like removing exotics and adding native plants, wetland reconnection to improve water quality and reduce mosquito problems on Spoil Islands. And we'll also put in education and outreach kiosks where we'll have signage that describes the different uses of the lagoon and why it's important. So, like I said, specifically, I work on the Spoil Islands mostly. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, they were created back in the 1940s and 1950s during the dredging of the Intercoastal Waterway. Basically, back when they were digging out the channel for ship traffic, they needed something to do with all this extra dredge spoil. And just the easiest thing at that time to do was to just dump it off to the side of the lagoon, just away from the channel, and just kind of leave it there to sit. So with time, they eventually became vegetated and became the habitats they are today with their various uses. You can see this is kind of a breakdown of the different counties and how many islands there are. It's kind of evenly split between Brevard and Indian River and for the most part St. Lucie County, and then a couple in Martin County as well. So these islands, since they were artificially man-made from lagoon bottom, the management was given over to our office since we manage the water itself. And back in 1990, we developed a management plan to kind of guide our management and set goals for what we wanted to accomplish on these islands. So the main thing with the Spoil Island Management Plan, the main thing it accomplished was creating designations for the islands based on what we felt the appropriate use was. So the three main categories that were picked were recreation, conservation, and education. So a majority of the islands in the lagoon are either recreation or education. And basically a recreation island is open to the public. People are free to go camping, picnicking, fishing, use it for whatever uses they would like, just as a recreation area, just like any state park. And then the third one is a conservation island. Those we identified as islands more than likely that have really great bird nesting on them. So those islands we felt we should list as conservation to help protect those nesting bird colonies, allow them to reproduce. So just to touch a little bit more on the Spoil Island bird nesting, like I said, a majority of the conservation islands have been designated conservation because we have some sort of bird nesting on them. These are all the typical coastal bird species you'll see in the area: brown pelicans, great blue herons, cormorants. white ibis, roseate spoonbills, wood storks, things like that. A lot of them are either protected by the state or the federal government, so these areas have become really essential habitat for them. It's becoming increasingly important as coastal development on the mainland and on the barrier island increases. These types of birds are running out of that fringing or wetland habitat that they typically nest on. So these islands are kind of becoming a kind of a bastion that they can still go to with only limited disturbance. They aren't obviously immune to disturbance out there. I have a couple of threats listed here. Those are kind of the big ones that we always notice. Entanglement is a really big problem. Not only are these conservation islands great for birds, but the surrounding habitat is also great for fish, so it attracts fishermen. We notice a lot of times just accidentally monofilament line will get cast into mangroves or the fringe around islands, and then unfortunately birds will get entangled and then possibly die from it. Disturbance is also an issue in general. If people are on the island or have their dogs running on it, if they flush the birds, especially during nesting season, when they're either incubating or taking care of young, exposing the young to the sun can be very detrimental to them, so that could be a problem too. So because of those facts, we ask that especially during nesting season that people stay off these conservation islands and allow the birds to rear their young in peace. But for the most part, that's actually the most management we do for conservation islands. We kind of just leave them and let them be. If we notice any type of major erosion issues or perhaps some sort of mammal impacts from raccoons or rats that can get onto the islands, we'll address that. But for the most part, a kind of hands-off approach seems to be the best one for managing conservation islands. Just to give you an idea of this area and some of the spoil islands that are around, we're about right here at Harbor Branch, and these are all the different spoil islands of the lagoon in this region. The way the spoil islands are named is the prefix of the county. So all of the islands in St. Lucie County start with the prefix SL, and then they have a number. So you can see the very northernmost island in St. Lucie County is right there, and that's SL1, and then SL2, SL3, and we throw a couple A's and B's in there just to make it nice and confusing. But that's just the general naming convention that we use. And you can see for this area, a majority of the islands are either recreation or education islands. And we do have a couple conservation islands that are dotting the landscape as well. And I also wanted to point out here that we have SL2, which is actually adopted by the Friends of Harbor Branch. And they do cleanups on the island, and they're actually going to be coming out this October to help with some bigger management issues there. So a big question that I always get by the public at boat ramps or just in my office or in general is, well, we have all these different islands. Some of them are conservation, some of them are recreation. How do we know which ones are which so we can go to the appropriate islands? Well, we have a few different methods of kind of educating the public, making everybody aware of these different projects. First and foremost, we try to have at every public boat ramp either a kiosk or like a brochure dispenser with maps of the local islands. These maps will show you which islands are conservation, which are recreation, if they have picnic tables or things like that on them. For recreation islands, which ones have deep water access, the easy places to pull your boat in, and things like that. You're also always more than welcome to contact our office. We have our email address and phone number, which actually I'll put this up at the end of the presentation as well. We're also moving into the digital world slowly but surely. We have the Spoil Island Project website that you can go to, and that's got really great interactive maps as well as a listing of all of our upcoming events we're going to be having. And we've also just recently moved into Google Maps as well. So you can just kind of Google Spoil Island Project map, and that's something you can take on a phone or print out to kind of show you a map of the area. And even more recently, we just launched in the last couple months through our working group is our Facebook page, where we're just using that as another place to kind of get word out to volunteers, post our events, and post any new and updated information about the Spoil Islands. And just some frequently asked questions I wanted to put out there that we always get about camping on the Spoil Islands. First and foremost, as I mentioned already, we ask that people who visit the islands to limit it to recreation or education islands. I think I forgot to explain it, but education islands actually, for the most part, they're just like recreation islands, but we've noted that a lot of times they'll have better plant life or habitat on them that we feel could be great for different types of outreach events. So a couple islands that have really diverse native Florida habitat, we'll take Boy Scout troops or school groups out to take them on tours of the island and just show them what like a stereotypical Florida habitat is and just educate them on the local ecosystem. Secondly, campsites are on a first-come, first-served basis. There's no reservations or anything required to use one of these islands or one of these campsites. So if you get to an island and you go to a campsite and there's nobody there, it is essentially yours for the camping. Thirdly, and I've underlined this one, is we ask that everybody pack out any waste or trash that they pack into the island. Obviously, there is no trash service. There's no way to get that trash off the island except occasionally us with our volunteers. So we ask that everybody just be responsible and take all their waste off the island with them. We also ask people to refrain from cutting shoreline vegetation, especially mangroves. The shoreline vegetation, mangroves in particular, are really great at stabilizing shorelines and preventing erosion. And when people cut those that shoreline vegetation for firewood or for whatever reason, that's going to increase the erosion rate and increase the loss rate of those islands. So in order to preserve those islands, we want to keep that vegetation there to help prevent erosion. I mentioned a little bit the Spoil Island project, and basically that's just an interagency working group with my office and just a wide range of volunteers and state and federal groups that get together, and we pool our resources to accomplish a lot of these tasks. Dennis kind of made the joke a while ago that we're a huge office with lots of people, and I made the large budget joke, but that is actually not the case, if you could believe it. Our office actually consists of 2 people. We cover 140 miles of the Indian River Lagoon, so we are entirely dependent on intergovernmental cooperation and volunteers to accomplish pretty much all of our tasks. So all this hard work that gets done is either done by us and other agencies, or you can see I just have some pictures on the right here of some of our different volunteer groups that come out to help us with our events. It is a very community-driven project that we work on. So this is just a quick flavor of some of the different groups that assist us. You can see all the different counties, FAU Harbor Branch, FIT, the Environmental Learning Center. So just a wide range of groups always come out to assist with our projects. So when we have these projects, we call them enhancement days. Typically in the core months, we have them on the 2nd Saturday of every month. It'll be starting in about September this year. We go out and we try to accomplish a number of main tasks depending on the island. First and foremost, we do a lot of exotic removal and then replace that exotic plant with native plants. A lot of times we'll do a picnic table installation or adding fire pits for campsites to increase the recreational value. And we're always doing general island cleanups just to kind of remove some of that debris for sanitary sake or just to prevent entanglement or that debris from washing into the lagoon. We also have a really great working relationship with a lot of the Boy Scout troops in the area. For any Boy Scout to graduate to an Eagle Scout, they have to complete some sort of construction or project. So we'll have the Boy Scouts come in and we'll provide them the supplies like the wood, the lumber, all the materials to maybe create a campsite, to build the picnic tables or do something like that. So we've had a really, really good working relationship with them, and you can see that bottom right-hand picture is a troop that actually did an island last year in Indian River County. And then we also have the Adopt a Spoil Island program, which I touched on earlier, where we have different groups or institutions adopt an island. They'll go out and do cleanups throughout the year to help keep the island clean, and then we'll partner for different types of projects depending on what they're interested in. So I know some islands, we had like a native plant society on an island, do like a butterfly garden to attract butterflies. With Harbor Branch, we're going to be going out in October to do some trail clearing and just some general exotic removal. It really depends on the agency and what they're interested in. So I mentioned really quick about exotic removal and why we do that, and also about fringing mangroves. So this is an Australian pine that's tipped over. Basically, Australian pine is an exotic species, for all you don't know. It's from Australia. And they have Australian pine and Brazilian pepper have been two of the big pioneers, unfortunately, on Spoil Islands, and they're both exotic plant species. The problem with Australian pine is they can grow right along the shoreline where the mangroves would, and since they grow really fast, they've been able to outcompete plants in those areas and kind of take over those shorelines. The problem with that is Australian pines have this way of growing where their roots don't grow down, they actually grow perpendicular once they're underneath the soil, which I guess serves them well in Australia, but once you get really high force winds and some saltwater inundation, as you can see in this picture, they just topple right over. So this Australian pine right here, it actually used to be on the shoreline, and the high winds and waves blew it over, and then the shoreline eroded out behind it, which you can see why my assistant here is standing in the water. So that's one of the reasons why we try to do exotic removal and then replant with natives to kind of replace that with an ecosystem that can actually survive the Florida weather events. So this is an island in Brevard County. It's called BC 47, so it's the 47th island in Brevard County. And this map just is kind of a brief overview of all the different projects that we've done on our volunteer-based programs. You can see all the different dots there, the different types of plant species for anybody who's interested in the different type of plants. We've tried to cover like a wide range of species at different habitats. The red areas are areas where we've removed exotics on this island. So you can see it's a very metered approach. We're removing it from certain areas with a purpose. I could touch on that later in a minute. And we also have two campsites on the island that were done by Boy Scouts. And you can see that that kiosk there, which is that little symbol, is an educational kiosk that we had put in a year or so. So this is an on-the-ground picture of one of the areas we've done some exotic removal. You can see that kind of the darker area of the soil was where the Brazilian pepper used to be, and we had these nice cabbage palms that were growing in there. So what we did was we removed all the Brazilian pepper, and we created this kind of shaded oasis for people to put a tent or just kind of hang out without having to bake in the sun. So that's the kind of exotic removal that we strive for. A lot of people sometimes don't like when we're removing exotics, and this is the explanation we try to give them, is we're not removing every piece of Australian pine or Brazilian pepper from the island. We're doing it in a very metered approach to benefit either the ecosystem or the people that are using it for recreation. A couple more pictures from the island. You can see our two campsites on the left, as well as the kiosk that we put in. As I mentioned, the two picnic tables were put in by a Boy Scout to get his Eagle Scout degree. And the kiosk was put in actually by students from Florida Institute of Technology that have adopted the island. I mentioned Roey's doing cleanups on the islands too. Every time we go out, here's just like some of the things we really try to concentrate on. Ghost fishing gear is a big problem for a lot of reasons. Basically just traps that are out there or nets that people have forgotten about or have washed away, but they'll still continue to entangle fish or dolphins or maybe birds, as well as with the crab traps with continuing to trap crabs or diamondback terrapins or things like that. With the plantings, we try to do things that are very functional as well. All the plants are native to the Indian River Lagoon area. We concentrate on two main types, either maritime hammock or coastal strand species that grow right along the barrier island or on the mainland. BC47, as I mentioned, is kind of like a test site. We planted a wide array of species there at different elevations just to kind of see what could take. But the main purposes we were looking for were either plants that are shade forming, that are going to provide nice places for people to recreate, or would maybe increase habitat value as a food source for birds or a nesting area or something like that. And we always try to plant in the removed areas where we've removed Brazilian pepper or Australian pine. The thought being there that there might be some leaf litter built up in the soil that provides some nutrients for the plants. And we're also not taking away open spaces that people might want to use on the island as well. So there's like a net loss of area on the island. I mentioned that we put a kiosk on the island as well, and this is one of the signs we actually had a FIT student do for us and install. You can see they have their logo, how they adopt it and everything, and just a general map of the area with the different islands and their designations. So we have our recreation islands as well as our conservation island at the bottom there. And so this is one of the projects we tried to tackle on BC47 to address erosion issues. A lot of the islands are eroding in one way, shape, or form. Since they're not a natural island, they're kind of placed in a weird area in the middle of the lagoon, and winds and waves and boat wakes kind of take their toll on them. So on the north side of BC47, we had this scarp form. It was kind of a slow, gentle slope that we wanted to address and see if we could find some methods of preventing that erosion to keep the island intact. So the idea we had is, first and foremost, we smoothed out the scarp with just shovels and a little elbow grease. And then what we did was we laid out this matting. And this matting is actually coconut fiber, woven into like a mat form. So it's 100% biodegradable and natural. We then got some volunteers from FIT to put various species of native plants in there. The idea being that these plants, as they grew, they were all ground covers, and they would mesh together and help to hold in that soil. So this was about 2 weeks after planting. It was in July of 2011 we did the initial. And then 1 month after planting, you can see the different plant species there. And the different plants were of the Spartina genus of grasses, as well as dune sunflower and Indian blanket flower, which if you guys have been beachside and you've seen the yellow sunflowery plants are the ones with the red fire wheels. Those are the types of flowers. And then 2 months after planting. So this was in September of 2011. In the September picture, we saw that we're getting a little bit of a scarp form along the bottom there, so we wanted to mitigate for that. So we got some logs that were made out of that coconut fiber and placed them at the bottom. So I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the dates, but if you recall in October, we actually had a really bad storm. They were kind of calling it the no-name hurricane. It was winds of like 50 miles an hour or so coming out of the north. It lasted for a day or two. It was pretty bad. They were calling it like a 1 in 100 year storm with just the amount of rainfall and the wind levels we had. In October, it was, in September, October, it was a very, very weird time. Well, I definitely remember it because it did a number on our site, unfortunately. We lost a good amount of shoreline there. You can see at the bottom, this is our coconut log that held in place, but it kind of got buried by sand that was falling out over the dune. But we kind of just chalked that up as a learning experience and just roll with the punches on that. And you can see, actually, this is a good example that I didn't think of before, but we actually had an Australian pine here and an Australian pine right there that were kind of on the slope, and they just totally washed out. They didn't stand a chance against that wave action, but neither did the scarp either. So what we did, this is a couple months later, we got a number of volunteers through our enhancement days, and we planted more plants along the base of the scarp there, a couple salt marsh grass species as well as mangroves to kind of see how the scarp smooths out over time. And since that happened, it's actually kind of steadied out. We haven't had too bad of northerly winds, and the scarp is kind of starting to reform itself and smooth out. So it's been very encouraging. We've also seen a lot of natural recruitment of native plants right along that coconut fiber log area. So this is sea purslane. It's a plant that we planted on the scarp, but actually naturally recruited or just washed down from the scarp and rerooted itself. A lot of stuff's been recruiting behind that log, and since even this picture's been taken, it's kind of covered the whole matting area. So we're encouraged by the recruitment we've seen. We have another one here. So there's some sea purslane as well as a dune sunflower sprout. We're seeing a lot of good recruitment in that area. So we're hoping that, forbidding any type of really strong northerly winds or hurricanes, these plants will help to stabilize that shoreline and do pretty well. We're also seeing mangroves. This is actually a black mangrove seed washing in and catching in that coconut fiber. So even if this site doesn't work out too well, we're very encouraged by the way this coconut fiber has been acting, and we hope to use this in other areas as a different type of shoreline stabilization technique. On that same island, after we had that really bad scarp, we didn't just kind of leave that site. We kind of tried a few different other treatments to see how that might work. So this is another area just a little west of that site where we planted a couple of different plant species as well as some red mangroves, and we're still monitoring it. This was actually just done about 2 months ago, so it's still in its early stages. And this is another area almost directly adjacent to that where we have another test with the coconut fiber as well as some sea oats, which were a dune species, as well as a different Spartina genus. So that's it for BC 47. That's just a brief overview of kind of a volunteer-based, hands-on approach to Spoil Island treatment. So now I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit more like large-scale, like top-down approach to Spoil Island enhancement. This is Spoil Island SL3, which is actually directly across the intercoastal waterway from here. So if any of you have looked at or seen it, recently it looks a lot different than this, but that's the island I'll be talking about. So this island in particular was about a 6-acre spoil island. It was a recreation island managed by our office. It had 4 campsites, and it was a very big island in the area. The problem with it, though, was the inner wetland, which is in the center of the island, right around here, was becoming really bad at breeding mosquitoes. Basically, it would rain, that wetland would fill up, and the whole island would just be this huge mosquito breeding ground. So it wasn't very popular. People weren't going to it because it was almost inhospitable with how bad the mosquitoes were. Since people weren't going there, the trails were getting overrun with Brazilian pepper and other exotics, and to the point where the campsites were pretty much unusable or inaccessible. So St. Lucie County actually was the one who identified the problem with the mosquitoes, and so we partnered with them and applied for a number of grants to do a total scrape down and replanting of this island. All the exotics were removed, we added natives to the island, and through our enhancement days we maintained it up until today. So here's the island before the enhancement, and now we have the island afterwards. This is almost right after the enhancement was completed. So you can see the island's gone through a big change. That brownish gray is actually mulch, and it doesn't show up too great on this screen, but there are little green dots there. Those are all the plants that were placed. So here's an aerial image of pretty much right after the enhancement efforts stopped. You can see actually this was very close to when it was done because we still have the barge here, some of the construction equipment. It was also right after a very, very heavy rain that we had because this is the wetland that had flooded the area after a heavy rain. But one of the things they did with the process of the enhancement was they dug a canal right here, and you can see that's a little bridge that crosses the canal to allow water to flush in and out of there, to allow fish to get in, and to help to mitigate those mosquitoes. And you can kind of see it, but all these little white lines here are actually PVC pipes that they were using to irrigate the plants until they got established. So here's an on-the-ground picture from pretty recently on the island. In addition to those big grant-funded activities, we also always got the Boy Scouts involved. So they came in, they fixed up the campsites, which had been dilapidated. You could see some of the boards they replaced. They weed whacked and mowed all the areas around the campsites, installed new barbecue grills, and did a great job cleaning up the area. The island's also been adopted by a local yacht club called the Moorings, and they come out and do routine cleanups and trail clearing as well. Here's just another campsite on the island. You can see same treatment with clearing all the ground vegetation, repairing the picnic tables, adding barbecue grills, things like that. So just to kind of see how the island changed over time, you can see all the high elevation plants are pretty much gone, all the Australian pine, which is up here. And then all you're left with is the fringing mangroves and just any of that lower native vegetation that was on the island. For any of you who are interested in the types of plants we planted, and I would mention these a little bit before, of course we added only native vegetation, ground covers that would help stabilize the sediment, and shade trees were the main plants that we tried to add. So I mentioned before dune sunflower, Indian blanket flower that you'll see in the dunes. Cabbage palms and green buttonwoods were some of our main shade producers that we planted, as well as railroad vine, which is a ground cover. And then just a wide range of other plants. We have sea grapes, strangler fig, gumbo limbo. Those are all great shade-producing plants. A sweet acacia, Spartina bakeri, and Seoxia daisy were just some of the other ones. These guys get big yellow daisy flowers, which you may see around the marshes around here. And then we had native recruits in the area that we monitored and have kept track of, which was very encouraging. I spoke about sea purslane a little while ago that we had come in, as well as more sea grapes and lizard's tail and a wider range of plants. We also had non-native plants come in that we're keeping an eye on as well. So Madagascar periwinkle was actually on the island before we did the enhancement and came back right afterwards, and I suspect it'll be there in many years in the future. For those of you who maybe have it in your backyard, you know once you kind of get it established, it's really hard to get rid of. But it's pretty and it grows fast, and it's a weak competitor, so we're thinking as we get more shade on the island, those will just get out-competed. Same thing with crow's foot grass. It's low grass that gets those big star-shaped seed heads. Those are slowly getting out-competed by the natives as well. And we had balsam apple come in, which is actually a big problem plant. We've been aggressively controlling that to stop it because it can kind of smother out. It's a vine that can kind of strangle out a lot of the native plants we have planted. So what we did to kind of monitor all these changes over time is we make routine visits to the island, and we set up PVC poles as photo stations where we go and just take 360-degree photos of the entire island. This is a little offset, but you can kind of get the idea of where the PVC poles were set all over the island to kind of capture those changes over time. In addition to the initial plantings that we did, we also, through our shoreline restoration project, did a lot of volunteer-based plantings along the shoreline to test more plant stabilization methods. So you can see these are just the dates. Some of them were planted, as well as the shorelines that we did. The western side because they get some boat wakes, as well as the northern side because of the northerly winds that we sometimes get that can be pretty detrimental to the islands. This is just a quick time lapse of one of those shoreline restoration experiments that we did. You can see this is the main line of grasses we planted, as well as some here and a couple back here of different plant species. The planting day was on April 26, 2011. And then we have 1 year, almost exactly 1 year later, you can see this area is completely grown in with those grasses, and hopefully those will serve to help prevent erosion on those shorelines. Got another time-lapse picture here. This is actually on the north side of the island. This is that big wetland I pointed out in the aerial. And we have some green buttonwoods here, which will hopefully one day serve as the shade trees for the island. So this is pretty much right as construction completed. You can see we have our water tanks, and there's a barge back there. So construction was actually still ongoing. 2011, March, a couple months later, you can see the buttonwoods are growing up, as well as the dune sunflowers picking up. And then we have October 2011, 1 year later. You can see we have the buttonwoods have significantly increased in height. We have dune sunflower here, and this is that crow's foot grass, that invasive that I was talking about that's kind of getting a foothold. Then we have July 2012, just a few weeks ago. We have the buttonwoods now that are about 15, 20 feet in height, which is great. And the dune sunflowers completely outcompeted those that crow's foot grass, that invasive in a lot of areas. So it's very, very encouraging that just almost a year and 3/4 later, we have great growth of these native plants. In a couple years, we should have really great shade on the island. Here's another section of the island. This is on the northern side as well, looking north towards our educational kiosk we have there. It's only one transition from October till July, or July of 2012, but you can see just how the island has changed over time. The big things to note here, here's more of those green buttonwoods, and there's a gumbo limbo and a sweet acacia back here. But those are, I think, the star performers on the island, even these upper elevations. You can see just how significantly their elevation has changed. And with a couple more years with really good rains, hopefully they'll be even taller. So, wrap it up there. I leave it with the information about how to contact us and all of our information, and I'd be happy to field any questions.